Welcome to our February meeting. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, John, for sharing your time with us. Just a few things as we get started. Number one, when you join the call, you would have got a notice that we're recording. So cameras on, cameras off, completely up to you. The recording will be available in the Doug YouTube channel Meetup playlist after the call. And like I said, today we'll go through a bit of what the Canadian Meetup is about, who Doug is, and then we'll hand it over to our presenter, John, to talk about Beyond Compliance, Cybersecurity as a Strategic Advantage. At the end of that, we'll have some debrief and some good conversation. So before we move on, just wanted to share with you, I don't know all of you Canadians, if you're like me streaming the Olympics on the side of your desk as well, but the men's hockey team, when I joined this call, was up 5-0. So go Canada. The women's hockey team beat Finland this morning, and the men's curling team won yesterday afternoon. The women's curling team won this morning, and so lots of exciting stuff happening. We also have won 2 silvers today. So gold medal or medal count is at 6. So
this is Canada. This is what we live for. This is our thing, right?
This is why we have winter, I think.
There we go.
Okay, so user group, all about connection. That's what we're here for. Connect with one another, network, and learn and grow from each other. So use the chat to engage. Feel free to add your LinkedIn or other links to continue connecting after this call. And, be part of the conversation. Share your thoughts, come off mute when you can, or add your comments to the chat. Few housekeeping items that we want to talk about. Of course, let everyone participate, be courteous and respectful at all times. And if you haven't yet, join our Meetup group to stay connected. And so the QR code is there for you to join that. By joining that, then you'll get the announcements of each of the meetups that we have. Generally, we host those on a monthly basis. Like I said, on tap today, John will be joining us just after the Doug intro. And then coming up over the next few months, next month, March 12th, mark your calendars, Josh Cook will be joining for a co-pilot session. We're still looking for something for April. So if you have an idea of content or you'd like to present, there'll be a QR code here just at the end of this slide deck where you can share your thoughts, and we will either source a speaker or reach out and make arrangements with you. So that's the April session we're looking for. May, we'll be in Vegas at DynamicsCon Live, and Kim and Madison will have some more information on that here right away. And then June, we are also looking for a speaker. So lots of opportunity to share your expertise as we move along.
And just to throw it out there, Diane, if you don't mind me saying, if you have an amazing topic that you would like to cover, but you need someone to support you, to be, holding your hand throughout the presentation so you're not doing it solo, let us know. Or if you have a great idea for a topic and you want someone else to present it, we can always present it on your behalf. So let us know. It's all about community and collaboration. So we're happy to hold your hand throughout something if it's your first time presenting.
Awesome. And then just a shout out to a number of other Doug Meetup communities that are either virtual or in person. I can add this at the end in the chat as well. You can also, through Meetup, find any of these groups that you might want to be part of. And I believe that Kim and Madison will also be sharing some information on how to connect for each of those groups. And as promised, share your ideas. Do you want to present? Do you want to learn about something? Use this QR code to share your thoughts about what the topic should be going forward for our meetups. We love to have a variety of topics and a variety of speakers. And so that's everything I have. Kim, I will hand it over to you to share your screen.
Thank you, Diane. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Good. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Nguyen. I am the event coordinator here at Doug, and I help Madison support the local Meetup program. And here to tell you a little bit about Doug. So Doug is a free community for users, implementers, and resellers of the Microsoft Business applications. So our main goal is to support the Microsoft Dynamics 365, GP, Power Platform, and AI community. We want to be able to give you the tools and materials and information that you need to excel and grow in both your personal and professional career. We have a few rules of engagement here and ask that you keep these meetups solely educational. So please, no sales pitches or any selling of your personal products or services. We want that everyone to come and be able to learn and gain educational content here. So Doug offers multiple different programs that you can join and participate. So first we have the online discussion forums where people can go and ask questions about a specific product. And of course, the community will be here to help answer. We also have virtual webinars and also sponsorship programs called Team Up if you're interested. And of course, local meetups like this one where people can join local meetups virtually or in person. We have about 62 groups globally right now. So for virtual meetups, we have a YouTube channel where we post the recordings after the meetups. So if you're ever interested to see what other groups are out there and want to attend even more meetings, we encourage you to check them out. And then we also have conferences and regionals, which I'll get into next. So if you want to learn more, you can scan the QR code in that corner to learn all about our programs. And this is a new slide that we recently added to the Doug intro deck. So if you scan this QR code, it will link you to an email opt-in form where people can see all of our 62 meetup groups and select which groups they want updates from. So after you sign up for this form, Doug will send out like notifications and updates on new meetups in their region, updates for the groups that they pick that they want to follow, and also reminders to register for like upcoming events like regionals and our large conferences like DynamicsCon. So we really encourage all of you to sign up. This will really keep you informed on the most updates, but also will help us collect more accurate emails, improve and streamline our overall communication process. We'll have this QR code display at all our events, but it will also remain here in the intro deck for all of the meetups. Madison, is there anything else I missed or you want to add to this new slide?
No, I think you covered it all. Yeah, I would just encourage you guys to all sign up. It's the best way to stay up to date on when this group posts meetups so that you guys know that they're happening, as well as any other events that Doug hosts. So I promise we won't spam your inbox. It just helps you guys know when events are coming up.
Thanks, Madison. All right, so next up is our largest conference of the year, DynamicsCon 2026. So this is happening from May 12th through 15th in Las Vegas. This is a fully community-led event and will focus on all of the Dynamics 365, GP, Power Platform, and AI. We're expecting about 350 speakers, so you can expect a ton of educational content here. It is also a really great networking opportunity if you're looking to get more involved in the community. So we're really excited and hope that you can join us. And after this, I'll post in the chat a 15% off discount code to register for your group.
Awesome.
And lastly, we have our 2026 DynamicsCon regionals. These are a little bit larger than these local meetups, but not as big at a large conference like DynamicsCon. They're about 150 to 300 attendees. And we hold these all over the region and the world. As you can see, we have one in Vancouver, Canada coming up, and then also Toronto as well, Africa, and also in Europe this year in Germany. It's a full day of content, and we'll focus on, of course, all of the 360 Dynamics 360 products. It is another great networking opportunity. So if you're interested in learning more, you can scan that QR code to learn more about all of our regionals coming up. And that's it for me, everyone. Thank you. Please reach out if you have any other questions or need anything else. I'll pass it back to the group and Jon to continue.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim, for all of that. Really, really excited about Vegas. Who is already registered on the call today?
I have got to register, but
Just
yeah.
me?
Just you. Got to get around to. I'm waiting for those discount codes. There we go. Now I got no excuses.
There you go. Perfect. Right on. Awesome. Okay. Well, without further ado, Jon, thank you again for sharing your time with us. And I will pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Give me just a moment here. We'll try to get my presentation loaded up into Teams. Let me know when that is visible for you, if you can.
We can see it.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, as Diane said, my name is Jon Cole. I'm a solution architect in all things cloud, M365, Azure, and also have a host of other responsibilities, but have really been integrated in the Microsoft partner space across organizations and different in the consulting aspect. So there's a lot of experience and a lot of benefit that I've gained from working with clients in different industries and sectors with different challenges, leveraging multiple Microsoft solutions. So today, the topic at hand, I met Malcolm at Macaulay at a convention last year, and we had talked a bit online and decided that this would be a good topic that could benefit a general audience across different implementations, not just Microsoft specifically, but really anyone in the technology space, because in this world that we're in, right, where we're struggling to determine compliance and all the requirements that we have, as well as trying to build value and understand, what is the real impact to all of our initiatives and all the work that we're actually trying to do. So the title of today's session is really, cybersecurity as a strategic advantage versus just compliance, just saying, where do we meet the bare minimum to just, check the box on the form and say we're good to go and leave it there. So we have a couple objectives today I hope to accomplish. One is to understand some of the latest cybersecurity risks impacting, Microsoft Dynamics and other cloud-based environments. Learn or understand better how to build a resilient cybersecurity posture that balances, security and those restrictions, governance, controls, your compliance requirements, but also still allows for business agility, right? We all know that sometimes security gets a bad name for keeping people from doing their work. So we always have to have it hand in hand of keeping us safe and secure, but allowing us to do the work that we all need to do. And hopefully gain some real world insights on creating a security first culture and the impact of that culture on an organization to really adopting security first and the benefits there. So to accomplish that, we're going to go through an agenda, compliance versus security. Why now? The current threat landscape, a resilient posture and layered security approach, the security first culture, and then some key takeaways. And I know after this, hopefully there'll be some questions or some conversation we can have around the topics if any additional information or insights required. So if we can, we'll jump right into compliance versus security. So really, sometimes the term compliance, but the compliance mindset is the bare minimum. Really, if we're focusing on just being compliant for some compliance sake, it's what's the least I have to do? How can I justify checking the box on the form? Compliance is really the bare minimum, but security is the strategic enabler. So they go hand in hand. Many times you have to implement security controls or configurations to meet your compliance. But if we're in a compliance mindset, that's really the bare minimum. It's what's the least we have to do. So those would be regulations. They really set the floor. But as we all seen in the world that we're in, the floor is not the greatest place to be, right? Attackers are aiming higher than the floor. So as practitioners or as leaders in organizations, if we're only focused on, okay, well, how can I satisfy the requirements of this form? Maybe it's my cyber insurance policy, or it's a HIPAA guideline, or in the US, we have a bunch of other financial and security requirements around those types of regulated industries, and I'm sure they have many more, right? Whatever compliance requirement you have, if our goal is just to meet that, to get someone off of our back, it doesn't give us the benefit of having the strategic enabler that security can provide, of allowing us to actually be more efficient and more productive and keep us safe and sort of protect us from ourselves. So while compliance is required, the why and the how behind what you're doing is key. So the business value of security, we could talk all day about that, but really I can break it down into a couple areas: risk mitigation, continuity, trust, and reputation as a differentiator. So if you're an organization that prioritizes security, right, it's not the wild, wild west in your environment, but there's a mature sense that's, mature, when I say mature, appropriate for the size and capability of your organization, right, to implement levels of security, being able to mitigate risk to the organization and potentially even your partners and your downstream clients or customers is super critical, right? Continuity. I don't really care what organization or what industry you're in, disruptions cost everyone money and time and are negative in their impact to an organization. So being able to maintain or better maintain continuity is important. Trust. Now, this one can have multiple factors, right? When we talk about trust, it could be from an end user standpoint or an employee is, I want to trust that my organization's handling our data, our work with the right amount of care, or our clients' data or our partners' data with the right kind of care. On the other side of that, trust and reputation as a differentiator go hand in hand. Your clients, your customers, and your partners want to trust that you are a secure organization, that you care, that you're not just trying to meet the bare minimum or trying to find a loophole or some way around being compliant or saying you're secure, but there's no real sense of security implemented in the organization as a priority. Because as we'll talk about in a few minutes, with the threat landscape and some of the attacks that are going on in the world, once that trust or that reputation is ruined, or a negative press event potentially happens, the opinion's public, or the public's opinion changes, whether that's, again, internal employees, clients, customers, our partners. And so if you can build trust and maintain your reputation, if you're compared with another, in your business, another vendor, another provider, and things are mostly equal, but you haven't had a major incident, or it's clear that security is a priority, that could be the very thing that brings business your way, brings employees to want to work for your type of organization or for your organization because of those priorities. So it's really it spreads throughout all areas, right? That security first culture, which we'll also talk about, but actually a real priority around security has more effect. So in all that, we've talked about compliance or security and the definition of what that could mean. So cybersecurity isn't just about passing audits. Like I said, it's, they're important, right? Audits are important. The checking, the reviewing is important, but really the reasoning behind what you're doing is far more important, in my opinion. Really, we do want to pass our audits that are required to meet certain compliance requirements, but we are really trying to protect our growth, keep our systems running, and build that trust that we talked about. So security done right really speeds transformation and reduces risk, instead of just being a cost center or just being a formality, as it were. If we can transform that from a formality into a real motivation in our core value of care and attention and responsibility, it begins to change the lens that we're viewing security from leadership all the way down to end users or employees. So today we're going to look at some real threats hitting Microsoft Dynamics and cloud environments, and how simple layered security steps can turn them into a strategic advantage. And so as we go into that threat landscape, digital transformation expands the tech service. So why now, right? I think no one needs to be told that the risk keeps getting greater. There are far more attackers in the world that are attempting nefarious and malicious activity. There are more companies, and data is more sensitive and more vulnerable to misuse. And it might not even be a direct financial hit or a ransomware or downtime, but just the very possibility that data could be exposed and what that could do for who owns the data or what the data is about has a drastic impact. So with technological advancements, especially with AI, right, the world is changing faster than ever. So attackers over time, I think it's always sort of what's the least amount of effort I can give for the most value. That's how we approach a lot of things. Well, attackers find the same way, right? They think the same way. It's if I'm targeting an organization or even maybe an individual user, if we take it all the way down, is there a way that I can have a drastic impact but limit my effort? And so with cloud, while there's a lot of positive impact, right? With cloud right now, being able to run productivity systems and line of business applications that isn't reliant on an on-premises infrastructure or and all the hardware and the software and the maintenance that goes into keeping that running, especially for smaller organizations, right? All the way to large, right? Those costs multiply at scale. And so it's sort of the same thing, but different. As cloud has introduced a lot of positive impact, all that progress has also enabled attackers more than ever to be able to try and take advantage of vulnerabilities in your organization. So while the too small to attack motto no longer stands true, if it ever really did, right? That was a lot of mindset of, if I'm a small organization and I'm not very public, I don't have an international presence, I'm not that much of a target. I'm not on an attacker's radar. But with with cloud and the effort in AI, especially right now, enabling us in productivity, right? We're big Copilot users, and I love all that it can do for me from a productivity and efficiency standpoint, even upskilling, all those great things. But if attackers can also leverage AI to script attacks, to gather information and exfiltrate, right? Attackers are more able to increase their impact with less and less effort, because things can be predetermined and prescripted that, no longer, for the most part, does someone have to sit and wait for a long time to do reconnaissance in an organization. If they're leveraging AI, they can likely run a few prompts and scripts, find it all, compile it all, and exfiltrate it very quickly if the correct security controls aren't in place. And, all that being said, the human element still drives most breaches. It's hard to believe that with all the firewall configurations and all the security software and our next-gen antivirus, EDR, MDR, SOC, SIM, all these terms, all these proactive tools and measures that we use, you would think, oh, that should be enough. But really, the human element still drives most breaches, as we'll see in the upcoming threat landscape. So security incident-related costs are also skyrocketing. So things from a security standpoint have been difficult to sort of translate to business need or business impact for a lot of folks, even security practitioners, right? Over time, it's been, well, we need to do this because this is best practice and we want to limit these attacks. And sometimes leadership, if they're not really bought into security or don't really understand, sometimes it just seems like it's a cost center. On a slide before, right? I had listed, right, that cybersecurity isn't just about passing on, it's about protecting growth, keeping systems running, and building trust. But security done right is a business enabler, not simply a cost center. So over the time where security has really been, what are we spending on it, right? There's not been a lot of true conversation on, well, what value is it actually providing? So the costs of security incidents skyrocketing and the frequency of those incidents increasing really starts to translate to business impact and business value. And the term I'll use a lot is risk mitigation or risk avoidance, right? If we start talking about our implementations or our configurations less about a security tool or a product, and really have our conversations around how much risk are we allowing, right? How much are we tolerant of? Some organizations are really tolerant to risk, but now with data and all the things that we mentioned around sensitivity, all the things that can happen, I feel like that slider on how much risk can you actually tolerate. Any risk is too much. Granted, between budget and all the other manpower and operations to manage and implement a complex security and governance plan and infrastructure that supports that can be difficult, and it's not in every organization's capability to do so to the same level. And what's the ROI, what's the return on investment of those efforts? I think if we focus on establishing how much risk can we tolerate, what risk are we eliminating or limiting, it makes more sense to our business leaders that are saying, okay, we can justify the spend because it's just like insurance policies, right? We have homeowners insurance. You never expect your house to catch on fire. You definitely don't want it to, and you're not running around with a match or a blowtorch trying to burn it down. If you were, I'd question that to some extent, but we're not doing that, and yet we have it, and hopefully we have fire coverage, because if it were to happen, the insurance will protect you. So it's always that if, but with the events and the landscape that we're going to talk about, and with those changes, it's much more likely than it's not an if, but a when. So as we move forward, some of the key threats that we see in the world is phishing and social engineering attacks, insider threats, ransomware and malware, misconfigured security roles and privileges, third-party app integration, and API abuse. So if we just talk about each one of these for a few minutes, phishing accounts for over 90% of breaches. And that's kind of surprising, and that goes back to that human element. And if we're not totally sure what phishing is, really, I'm including phishing, vishing, those sorts of things. It's an attempt by an attacker to obtain someone's credentials. So if we've done our training, or we've been informed by our departments, really it could come through an email, right? It's a shipment with an attachment for something you've ordered that's delayed, and someone clicks on it and says, enter your credentials, and we type them in. Well, that's a phishing attempt, and the goal of that is not necessarily ransomware or their sort of virus or malicious code injection per se, but it's, in my opinion, I know we call it a hack, or it really is a breach, but it's not even penetrating our EDR. It's not penetrating our firewall and getting through. The attacker's not going that way. It's preying on the vulnerability of human people that are then making a mistake and thinking, oh, I need to do this. So now the attacker has these credentials that they can try to use, actual valid credentials to attack your organization with. So with 90% of breaches, or more than 90%, all coming back down to phishing, it really makes us wonder, how do we focus? And in some of the layered security approach, we'll talk about phishing and some simple things to try to do to add to your stack or your program of tools and controls to help mitigate that, because it's the number one risk as far as volume. Now, ransomware attacks are up 40% year over year. And so we've all seen small organizations, large organizations in the news cycle where they're shut down for sometimes days, some organization weeks, and some organizations, against law enforcement advice, have tried to pay the ransom to try to get files unlocked because it's caused such horrible damage. So supply chain attacks have quadrupled, which some of that's ransomware and phishing and all the various the myriad of methods that attackers now have to try to take advantage of an organization or individuals in that organization. And so that's more like phishing and social engineering. There was a really famous story that over 10 years, an attacker was able to get about $100 million from Google. And really, it wasn't because they stole it or had it wired. It was really through a social engineering attack to where they found out that Google was doing business with these hardware vendors. And so they pretended to be one of those vendors, and they sent an invoice, and on the invoice it had details for equipment that Google would normally purchase from this vendor. And without training and without looking at it, Google paid it over 10 years. It took a long time to uncover it, mostly due to the complexity and the scale and size of organization that Google is. But if you think about that, it's not even really a hack. It's just someone pretending to be someone that they're not, and able to get that much of a financial payday off of a relatively simple scheme. Sort of makes you wonder. It's, how many ways are there out there? How vigilant do I need to be? And I would say we all have to be incredibly vigilant when we get an email, when we get a call, when we get a text message, someone randomly messages you in Teams, making sure that, is this user a part of an organization? Have I talked to this user before? Are they actually from my IT? Because they just messaged me in Teams. There's tenant level and security settings in the Microsoft 365 space that if your organization doesn't have the right configuration set up, that anonymous users that are even unmanaged, so personal people, so an attacker in India, Pakistan, anywhere, can register for a Microsoft 365 personal account, get on Teams if they've got your email, and direct message you in Teams. And a lot of people in my experience have really had a hard time when someone messages you in Teams. You sort of assume that it's real because it's Teams, right? It's not a weird phone call, and it's not an email, which we're sort of used to at this time. But based on the numbers, we see that we're not. Because if we were, phishing wouldn't account for more than 90% of all breaches. But things like that would definitely affect our ability to reason, and we need to make sure we have the right controls in place to protect them. Insider threats are a little bit more difficult. Some of these are protecting users from themselves, whether accidental or malicious. So in many cases, insider threat is someone that's acting nefariously on purpose, but they actually work for the organization, whether it be a disgruntled employee or someone that's trying to affect long-term damage before they make their escape. It's vindictive in some way. If I would call that like a secondary or a tertiary sort of consideration. Not that it's not important. Insider risk is important, but really focusing on keeping attackers out, or keeping out what's not supposed to be in there, is primary versus once they're in, what can they do? Though it's all important, right? I think it's a prioritized approach will affect our results. So as we talked about earlier, cloud has brought a lot of positivities, but now, with D365, applications now that are in a hosted way. Sure, there's lots of security controls and configurations, but it's cloud, it's out there, it's able to be attacked. And Microsoft has a large responsibility in protecting the physical components of those systems. But when it comes down to your security role and privilege configuration, and even your third-party app integrations and the APIs that you're using for workflows and all your applications to work together, if those aren't really looked at and managed and are restrictive as possible, you're taking a system that is secure, but you are not fully securing it. So if your ERP system or your CRM were to become compromised, and to what extent, it could paralyze an organization from operations, right? If someone poisoned all your CRM data, but it was too hard to tell and you don't know how long it's been going on, that could affect your whole sales cycle. It could affect it depending on to what extent you're using that piece of software. But in many ERP systems that we talk about, especially D365, there could be everything from accounts payable and invoicing to inventory and all these different modules and components that any one of them, if they were to be taken out of the flow of business or the workflow, the process, would be detrimental and devastating to an organization. So as we move into the next step here, I want to talk about a couple specific examples. But global cybercrime losses right now last year were $16.6 billion. So business email compromise alone is a subsection of those attacks. That's $2.77 billion. So just the sort of phishing attempt and someone taking control of an email account resulted in $2.77 billion in losses. And really, that's what's reported or surveyed. There's much information out there that because of compliance, organizations aren't mandated to report it, and so they don't, because of that whole trust factor. Whether that's right or wrong, that's a different discussion, but essentially is what happens. There are many organizations that are attacked and they don't have to report it or tell anyone about it, and so they don't. So the global average cost of a data breach is $4.88 million. Now, granted, that's an average based on business email compromise, ransomware, all the big attacks, but still $4.88 million per breach. With how many breaches that happen, you can see there's a lot of funds, there's a lot of impact being generated there. And I know it's not front of mind, right? We go to work and we do our jobs and we try to do the best thing and help our communities and those sorts of things. But all these nefarious actors, through relatively simple or complex schemes, are really generating a lot of business. There was a graph, I don't have it in the presentation, but I can allude to it, is that if cybercrime in general were a country, which is sort of an abstract question, it would be like the third largest economy in the world. Now, you can't really equate that to a country. You understand what I'm saying? But the amount of revenue, the amount of money that's being taken or attempted to be taken is just astronomical. It's larger than a lot of countries' GDP, right? It's more than the whole country is producing, or in total revenue of products sent out or in, all those sorts of numbers. It's an economic scale that's crazy. And so that being said, like I said it before, I've heard it many, many times in organizations of many different sizes. It's sort of, that'll never happen to me. We're too small to attack. We're too obscure. No one knows who we are. And that if it ever was true, it's not true any longer. And you can see that in the numbers because it's so easy to attack someone with a business email compromise, because it's so easy to try to phish and attack a large amount of people with AI. Phishing is getting incredibly effective, even made more effective because of the efficacy of AI simulating real emails or domains and visually making things look like, oh, this is a Microsoft email, or this is an Adobe or a Salesforce email, or this is a vendor that I work with. And it might not even be that your system was captured for them to gain that. They've captured it or seen it someplace else, ask it to replicate and then target these specific companies. And then once they're inside, leveraging AI to go and find all the files and access or data that you have access to as a user. And that's where like the insider risk almost applies to even attackers in that way. It's if I have a compromised account, now if I'm AI enabled, whether that's Copilot or anything else, an AI agent or something that's integrated into tools, what am I enabling that attacker to do? So now we even have to be more restrictive. And I appreciate in the chat, like you're a nonprofit of 30 people, you get hit with ransomware. That's incredibly challenging because, as we know, like, oh, we're not a monster in size, but that also has an impact of, many people are probably wearing many hats, right? We're trying to do multiple things to keep the ship afloat and to serve our communities, and to do those things and to have to face a challenge like that can just be even more difficult because there's usually not the same level of contingency fund or the same cyber policy that's available, because the premiums are going higher and higher and higher. Though, is it still a good idea to have? Absolutely. So everything in balance, right? Our goal is to, I think it's Arctic Wolf that has the saying, their mission is to eliminate cyber risk or cyber threats, right? And I think that's a mindset we need to be in, but it will likely never happen. It's always going to be a cat and mouse game of pursuing eliminating all that we can. And that's where that risk conversation comes in, is how much risk can we tolerate? What are we going to accept? What's our budget? And those sorts of things. So before I get sidetracked, let's scoot ahead here. So I have a couple of attack examples. So one is a supply chain ransomware event that was targeting ERP data. So in November of 2024, a ransomware group attacked a major supply chain software provider using a double extortion strategy. So essentially, they were able to encrypt ERP-related data and exfiltrated 680 gigs of sensitive information, including insurance documents and operational data. So this is a multifaceted problem with multiple different types of risk. The attackers exploited vulnerabilities in their file transfer software. So they were disrupting services for clients like Starbucks and Procter & Gamble. So the breach led to millions in operational losses due to supply chain interruptions. The root cause was an inadequate vetting of a third-party software and lack of segmentation in ERP. So sometimes we talk about lateral movement in a network, or at least from an attack perspective, to where if this particular piece of the environment or this software can be compromised, it's not so much that that is the end of the world or that's the gold, the pot of gold they're looking for. It's okay, now that I'm in and I'm here, where else can I go? What am I integrated with? What else can I infiltrate? And so sometimes it's, once you're in, it's lateral movement across the network, which is really what happened here. Being able to interrupt the software or the file transfer software disrupted the client's experience. So not even just fulfillment from the organization side, but on the client experience. And then their sensitive data was sent out, and then the data was encrypted. So they've got a lot of different problems that are being experienced, and how do you handle that in a timely way? Because that's all hands on deck. Let's get things back up and running, because the world, right? I mean, if you think about how many Starbucks locations there are that could be leveraging this data, whether it's just when our supply is going to come in, where they're going to be delivered, that's tied into logistics, like the waterfall, the cascading effect really doesn't stop, and it just increases, and the longer it's down, the worse the impact is, and that could really result in loss of business after you're back up and running. Some people say, well, no, like it happened to you, and maybe it's not right, but we can't do business with you any longer because that sense of trust is gone. And that can all come down to how the organization handles the risk as well. But another example we have here is phishing and social engineering for a Dynamics CRM product. So it resulted in $3.2 million in losses. So in May of 25, attackers launched a phishing campaign abusing Microsoft Dynamics 365 customer voice. So they were sending emails with fake financial themes like settlement statement and redirecting the users through legitimate looking pages to spoof Microsoft login. So the campaign reached over 1 million mailboxes across 350 organizations, bypassing multi-factor, and resulted in credential theft and financial fraud exceeding $3.2 million. The underlying cause was user trust in Microsoft branded domains and insufficient phishing awareness training. So really, if you look at this attack wasn't even on one particular organization. They took advantage of an organization and then used that organization as a platform to then just attack everyone they were partnered with in other organizations. And a lot of that data on those organizations was obtained through the CRM. And so then by sending a statement out from this, it looks valid, but it's a false link. I'm going to go here. They're going to log in. They get more credentials there because it's phish, and it just keeps going and going and going. And so not to be doom and gloom or to focus only on the negative, right? The examples of these threats really reflect the risks that we're all facing, no matter what size or scale or industry that we're in, and how some of the most significant attacks can come from simple oversights, but be major, major breaches. And so now I want to go into a layered approach. We talk about layered security for a moment here. So really, your program or your overall initiative, everything that you're looking at could really be dependent on so many different components, right? It could, there's many different ways to do the same thing, and each practitioner, each executive or leadership is probably going to have a slightly different way of doing that. But really, most of them are going to contain some of the same types of high-level principles or ideologies. So one to focus on: identity, endpoint, data security, following just enough access or implementing a zero trust model, real-time detection and aggregation, SOC and SIM, and training. And so if we look at these and I'll describe them a little bit and break them down, and then also some solutions that as Dynamics Group users, your IT would be familiar with, because they're already integrated into tools that you're already using. And so if we talk about identity, the most important part of where things start at from a security perspective is the who. I break it down into the who, the what, the where. If we start at the who, which is the identity, it's your user, my employee, a contractor. It's really, who am I trying to provide resources to, and who are they? What type of access should they have? All those sorts of things. So if we start with the who and the identity, that's really mostly, it might be an Active Directory. It might be a Microsoft Entra. It could be Okta, right? There's many different names of platforms and tools out there to handle your identity, but really the base is we have to protect the who. We have to protect the user. So as a user, what sort of restrictions are implemented? Multi-factor authentication, right? I think we're so familiar with multi-factor and all the wonderful things that it can bring and all the wonderful benefits that it can provide. And for a long time, multi-factor was looked at as just like an irritation. It's a nice to have. And now we've seen it's essentially a requirement. If you're not implementing multi-factor across the board, it's probably not the wisest decision. And this goes back to compliance versus security. And where we look at how far are we going to go, meaning if we implement MFA and we say, well, we have MFA, we checked it on the form, but to what extent do you have it? Do you have, are you leveraging conditional access with Entra to say, no, it's not just per user, or it's set up in a way that we can forget to turn it on, but we have all these other accounts that are used for service and they access applications, or they're used for API authentication, but we don't have multi-factor on them, but we're not restricting them from login. See how those two things aren't equal? If I have 30 users, let's just take a small organization. If I have 30 users and 10 of them have MFA, okay, that's great, potentially. But also, what about the other 20 that don't? And maybe 10 of those are only or 5 are service accounts, but they're administrative and they're high level and there's not MFA on it. Or we're using some sort of integration for a piece of equipment that has to have an account. Well, leveraging something like conditional access can say, okay, these users, everything has to have MFA by default. These groups of users or types of users are excluded, but I'm going to restrict access from where they can log in. Meaning they're only from office locations. Okay, that's allowed. Nothing outside the country. Nothing outside our office locations. Am I still presenting? I think someone.
You're good.
Okay, let me get back. Okay, sorry about that. And so from the identity standpoint, I'll spend a little bit of time here just because it is important, right? Without considering the who, without considering, what restrictions do we need to have on that user? And maybe even, if we have salaried or hourly and they're not supposed to log in from outside the office on times they're not working because of compliance requirements, making sure there's a policy in place like conditional access to say, hey, this type of login is not allowed, this type of device isn't allowed. So leveraging a part of your platform, your suite, is really going to be focus a lot on that identity piece. And endpoint is really, I think we all know what our endpoints are: our laptops, our workstations, tablets, phones. That's sort of like the what or the where, in that we have the user. Now, from what is that user going to access the resources? Is it a personal device? Is it a corporate-owned device? Does it have to sit in our office? Does it have the right software controls configured on it to protect it from compromise? Because there's different ways to attack, right? I might be attacking the applications to log in as a user, or servers or firewalls trying to bypass it, or I might just try to send a link or an email, so that way we try to compromise an endpoint which doesn't have the right protections on it. So when a user logs into your organization's systems with that, the compromise can happen from there. Right, so endpoint becomes really, really important, and maybe that's leveraging tools like an EDR, even using Microsoft Defender or SentinelOne. So there's so many products out there, and what fits right for your organization depends on the overall picture. So I don't want to necessarily pitch a certain product to fix it, though Microsoft products are great, and their benefit of integrating into the stack that you're already leveraging is it helps keep things smaller for your management team. It's not creating new places for them to have to configure to keep things safe and secure. So we talked about identity and endpoint, and even management at that endpoint. Are you leveraging Intune or a cloud-based MDM to control those endpoints, to say, when they're not in an office or when they're connected to the internet, I still want to have the ability to force new policies. If we say we just discovered a vulnerability and we have to deploy this patch, or we have to deploy this update to this software, how are we going to do that if we're not managing those endpoints effectively? So thinking about Intune or there's other platforms out there, but we're in a Microsoft group talking about Microsoft. So and Intune's my tool of choice in this way, because it also integrates with Entra and conditional access to say, not only do you have to have MFA and you can't log outside the country and you have to use phishing resistant MFA, but you have to use one of our devices managed in Intune. If you try to use a personal device and log into CRM or D365 or even your email, it's not going to happen. Now, on the flip side of that, with so many personal devices being used for email only, there's ways to configure those policies that do allow those personal devices to like a mobile phone to connect to email without requiring the old like enrollment in MDM to manage the whole device, but to say to leverage MAM or mobile application management to say, you know what, if you're going to access our systems through your mobile phone, you're going to have to accept this, and then the data for our organization is going to be encrypted on your device. But we're not going to take complete control of your phone because there's been things through the years where liability concerns about deleting people's pictures and wiping phones and things that we've all heard the horror stories. So Microsoft has really done a good job of providing options to both sort of complete corporate owned devices and some bring your own device as well. Following just enough access or zero trust, Microsoft and Entra conditional access and Entra private and internet access, all those sorts of tools are really following a zero trust, a ZTNA, zero trust network access approach by the way it does the validation of saying, each time a user goes to access a resource, it's going to do a validation to make sure, number one, the user's still valid, two, that they still have access to the resource they're trying to use. But in our manual or in our governance mind, where we say, okay, we have the who, and we know they have a device and endpoint, what resources am I giving them access to? We need to make sure that we're just giving just enough access for them to do their role. It might seem counterproductive because then you're going to have to assign a whole bunch of permissions. We're going to have to keep modifying this, and really there's a lot of work to determine what someone might need. But following just enough access really gives you the opportunity to say, you're protecting the user from themselves. If there's something they shouldn't have access that they don't even know about, but they do have, I'm sorry, let me start over. If a user doesn't know about a certain types of sensitive information, but they have access to it, that's sort of an unknown risk they're not even aware of. So if they get compromised and an attacker takes control of their account, that attacker will gain access to whatever they have access to. And so that user is being put at risk and they don't even know what they have access to. So by following just enough access, you're protecting the organization, but also the users from themselves sometimes. And so in real-time detection and aggregation, SOC and SIM, that's a great add-on for a security program. And really what this is trying to collect all the logs from everywhere and in real time being able to analyze them to, number one, predict behavior to see if there's something happening in Entra or D365 or in the antivirus software on a workstation. It looks, for lack of a better word, sketchy, right? It looks suspicious. And that's the word I was looking for. How do we, now we have alerting, now we have visibility, and we can go either take an automated action and stop it from happening, or we monitor those alerts, investigate, and do what we need to do. But having that a platform like that implemented gives you real-time visibility and the ability to make a lot of choices and decisions that without that data you simply couldn't make. And I don't want to minimize training, right? I don't want to eliminate the amount of value that training can provide. So, and we'll see here that all of this kind of works its way into being a part of your plan. And from a layered security approach, a plan's essential, right? Organizations that embed security into their digital transformation efforts, and I know that's a word that's used a lot, right? But basically, you're taking from on-prem, you're taking from one way to another. We're more and more digital. Most people are cloud, at least some extent, and hybrid. But if we're embedding cybersecurity into the process and the effort of getting there, they're 6 times more likely to experience successful digital transformations than those that don't. So meaning if security isn't an afterthought, it's just part of it. We want to make sure and vet it. What are all the permissions? Who needs access? What are we going to integrate with? Are we thinking about all these different components that the numbers say you're 6 times more likely to have a successful deployment, a successful implementation than not? Following our framework is important, and there's many of them out there, whether that's following CISA or NIST guidelines or those recommendations of private organizations as well. But I always like to take a practical security approach, right? Security, not just for security's sake, but practically we have to, because we're doing business, we have to make sure that we can still do business just in the most secure way. Being proactive and not reactive. That plan, having that in place, helps to anticipate threats before they occur. Like the SOC and SIM, it's predictive of this behavior looks questionable. Maybe you should take action before the attack actually happens. It also allows alignment with business goals, right? You're ensuring that security supports operations and doesn't hold them back. You're optimizing and focusing your time, budget, and personnel on the most critical risks. So you're still focusing on meeting your compliance and governance needs within your structured policy, but you're doing so in a way that enables you to react in case of an incident or be prepared for one. An interesting graph here, the average organization has 76 tools or 76 security tools to manage, and most of them are all separate. Now, granted, this is an average of small and large organizations. 71% of them go underutilized. So most tools are not utilized to the full extent of their capabilities, right? 47% only have daily use, and 36% have confidence. Few leaders trust the controls actually work. Yeah, we signed off, we implemented it. I'm not really sure if it's doing anything. I'm not sure that it works. I don't fully trust it. Now, there's a 4 times ROI for consolidating tools into integrated platforms. So meaning like we just talked about, like if you have several different EDRs and an identity provider, that all might be necessary. But if not, if you're using one place, one tool that you already have more fully, there's going to be an ROI for that, and you're going to make management and effectiveness more simple. Now, moving from layered security quickly, if we can. I know I tend to overtalk. I get excited a little bit. We want to talk about security first culture. So that might be one of the most important areas to focus on, right? Security first culture empowers every employee to be accountable, right? It means security isn't just an IT checklist. It's just not like, yeah, we want to be secure. We're saying we're secure. Go figure that out. And all the way from leadership down, it's sort of people like, are we secure? I don't know. And the leadership is, well, let's say we are. Let's try to do what we are, but I don't know either. So by weaving it into every business process and decision, we're embedding that. So when people understand the role, they become the first in the line of defense against threats like phishing and social engineering. Understanding like, hey, as leaders, we're accountable. What happens in our organization, we're accountable for. And that means we're also accountable for making sure that employees get the training and the information that they need to make better decisions. Earlier on, I said that it's like 90% are phishing, and the human impact on phishing, like it's mostly a human component. So if we're using all this tooling, but we're ignoring enabling and empowering and educating our users to do better, what are we actually doing? So going beyond compliance, going beyond the bare minimum, going beyond the floor to say, hey, as a part of daily decision making, if it's technology, if it's physical access to buildings and rooms, to not settle and just say, let's overthink it for a minute in a practical way and just make sure that it's embedded in every meeting in our processes and every implementation. It's not something where a consultant or someone says at the end, oh, by the way, how did you want to secure this? And I don't know. It's an afterthought, and then there's a budget overrun or a change order. Everybody hates those. So embedding it proactively in the process changes the outcome. And so when human error drives most breaches, culture is the strongest defense. Because if it's part of your culture, everyone's empowered and accountable. We're all on the same page. We have different roles and responsibilities, but at the end of the day, we're all playing for the same team. We all want to be more secure. No one wants to cause an incident, much less be responsible for one. So let's just act that way. Executive sponsorship sets the tone for an entire organization. It's really difficult coming from being a technology practitioner. If executives or leadership doesn't really buy into the tools or the mission or the goal, they're never going to buy into the cost. So, and without their buy-in, it just becomes a checkbox. It's going to get blamed on a CISO. It's going to get blamed on a CIO or an analyst or some, Jim said this was going to be a great product and it's going to protect us. Well, we just had an attack. Typically that conversation right there started, there wasn't executive sponsorship or buy-in. It wasn't treated as a holistic part of what we do. It was just a compliance task. And so everyone else will take that same feeling. True buy-in means executives champion security. They allocate the appropriate resources, whether that's people or money or time, or sometimes all three, and model the right behaviors, right? That accountability and that responsibility is key. And that's really the difference between a resilient organization and one that's like, hey, we bought Sophos, we're hoping for the best. Maybe we won't get attacked. And if that's more than what you have now, it's a start. But really understanding that security first culture, that mindset, drives more change than any tool or software, right? And so if we think about, okay, from a leadership perspective, what do they drive? They drive resource allocation, policy enforcement, strategic alignment, culture adoption. Some folks won't do something unless it's a requirement, or unless their boss or their boss's boss or someone up top says, hey, this is what we're going to do. Whether they like it or not, many people will comply. But again, compliance is not what we're after. So saying, here's the guideline, here's what we're going to do, but also here's why. Here's what we're trying to prevent, right? Giving people the information to say, we're wanting to protect you. I don't want to put MFA on my phone or my account. Well, would you rather be a part of the 90% of phishing attacks? Would you rather, or 90%, would you rather contribute to the $16.6 billion in cybercrime losses that are occurring? I would be willing to say that no one does. No one wants to be part of that. And so with leadership driving so many things within an organization, really, we have to look at the impact of leadership by the numbers. So we saw all that they're accountable for. So when leadership is bought in, when data is clear, the executives lead on security, organizations are more resilient, they recover faster, and are less likely to suffer costly breaches. Less likely. Without leadership, security tools are underutilized and confidence drops. So just if we look at the slide, right, 6 times more likely to succeed just because of executive buy-in and beyond, like, yeah, I think that's okay. Actual buy-in and being a part of the process and being accountable and responsible. They recover 41% faster from breaches. They're 32% more likely to restore operations within 48 hours. And they experience less financial and reputational damage. And both of those are equally, maybe the reputational even more so than financial, because a lot of times if we're being simple, you can make more money, you can get more revenue, you can't get back your reputation. Right? I think Warren Buffett said at one time, don't hold me to it, it's not a quote, it's close. Paraphrase is, it takes 35 years to build our reputation and 2 minutes to lose it, and it's all gone. So we have to treat everything, with that level of ownership that it's ours. And so making security a leadership priority. Embed security in strategic planning. Include executives in trainings and simulations. Don't exclude them. Make them a part of it, because if they're not a part of it and they don't understand it, they won't use it and they won't champion it. Promote shared responsibility across all levels. We're all a part, different roles and responsibilities, but we're all a part of it. We want to celebrate security wins to reinforce culture. So when we launch a campaign and we have a 98 or 99% pass rate of people not succumbing to the phishing test and failing it, right? Let's celebrate that, and let's say, okay, let's take the opportunity. What did we learn? Even in our meetings or weekly gatherings or however your organization is structured from that way, bringing security into the forefront to say, hey, we're implementing new controls. We're making sure that we're reviewing access to all our systems regularly, and we're building that confidence so people can understand, oh, we are doing a lot, and we understand why we're doing, all the way from leadership all the way down to the employer, the end user level, and maybe even from a customer or client perspective, right? Building that trust and relationship. If they understand, hey, this is what we're doing, right? We secure this way, we have these things deployed, we're training our users, those customers and clients will get word of that, and they'll build and foster a lot more trust in your organization. So to start by building a security first culture, where do we go? Well, you have to start at the top. Leaders need to be visible, involved, and proactive. When executives participate in the training and celebrate the wins, it sends a powerful message. Security is everyone's job, right? And I think we've all been in situations, or at least I have, where many times, IT leaders will choose to exclude the executives because maybe some executives are difficult to work with, or they don't want to have the restriction, or they don't want to be limited. And some of that's due to a lack of understanding at the impact they're having. They don't want to be impacted because their role is so important, which we can all agree. Our leaders are important. But being able to have that discussion to say, here's the level of risk that behavior is going to provide to the organization. It's going to hit your bottom line and your trust and your reputation. Communicated in that way that sort of looks and declares the need or the issue, and then, hey, here's why, and making that understood even from the leadership level, that's going to trickle down and that's going to be absorbed by all the people in the organization. And so really, just to summarize real quickly, overall business value, phishing training is a 50x ROI. So whether that's a platform like KnowBe4 or the many others, just having a successful or a thought out complex program that you're running to make sure your users are being trained, it's 50 times ROI on the cost because of what you're preventing, or the likelihood that they will detect a phishing email and report it and not click on it and enter their credentials. It also builds loyalty and trust, right? 84% of users feel more loyal to businesses with strong security practices. 48% have stopped buying from companies over privacy concerns, right? Credit card companies, major companies, health organizations, insurance. All my data was exposed. Well, I don't want to work with them anymore. Like, they already mishandled it. They evidently don't care or don't care enough. So it does drive consumer choice. And for every dollar spent on proactive security controls, organizations can avoid up to $3 in breach-related losses. So if we're really looking at, again, that's a dollars comparison of, yes, we're spending this money, it's a cost center, but we're potentially saving this much. And if that event never happens, it's money well spent, right? So security isn't about avoiding the fines. It's about protecting revenue, building customer loyalty, and enabling business growth. Investing in security pays off. Automation and training, as we see 50x, provides huge returns, while breaches and lost trust can just devastate or completely shut down a business and it never recovers. Executives and customers alike can now see that security as a strategic advantage provides much more benefit. And it's not just a regulatory hurdle or something we have to comply with. A few key takeaways. It's a strategic business enabler, not just a compliance checkbox. Modern threats demand layered adaptive defenses, especially around identity, apps, and data. If you're not looking at that, even a small organization, from a complex way, you are not going to have the layered approach that you need. That's my presentation. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your time and your listening, and I'll turn it back over to Diane.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jon. What a great presentation. I don't even know where to start unpacking everything that you shared with us. There was just so much good stuff in each and every one of those slides. From a user on the business side perspective, I loved that conversation around integrating security during each of the implementations. And then it's not an afterthought. It's not scope creep. It's not budget increases. And it's just part of the thing that we're introducing, whatever that might be. And I really enjoyed that piece, as well as the comment around we have to do business, but in a secure way. And security really enhancing operations rather than hindering it. And I think sometimes that's, where that conversation goes within business is, well, security is going to make me take more time to serve my clients or my customers, or it's going to provide stumbling blocks. And really, it's there to just help us do better and help our customers have a better experience. So really great stuff. Is there any questions from anyone on the call for Jon?
No, that was great. Thanks, Jon. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Good stuff. All right. Well, we have been recording. And so Madison and Kim will have the recording up on the Doug YouTube channel in the next little bit, and we'll post on the Meetup group once it's available for everyone to revisit. Thanks again, Jon, for taking time, sharing your time with us and your expertise. Really, really great stuff. And until next month, everyone have a fabulous day and a fabulous February.